Welcome to my talk, Cloud Engagement Mastery, the Red Team Edition. Uh, this is who I am. I'm a Red Team Engineer at Grab and also Adjunct Lecturer at Singapore Management University. On my free time, I play CTS for CTFSG and HK Ictos, and every year I pay money to go Vegas just to play CTF for, I don't know, people go there have fun, I go there to play CTF for 3-4 days at DevCon. So, who is this talk for? Anyone, literally, anyone, and with an open mind to learn more about what's my perspective on red team planning, especially the internal cloud environment. So for those who are new or trying to get in the red team, let me cover some like ground foundations of what is red team, right? We are not testing pens nor vulnerability scanners, okay? We are literally paid to make trouble. So I asked ChatGPT in no less than 20 words explain what is red team. It tells me, it simulates adversary tactics and rigorously tests and identify weakness in an organization. So by this sentence, right, you know that there's not your run-of-the-mill pen testing, vulnerability scanning, or whatever it is. It's literally end-to-end in your organization. The keyword is organization, which brings me to this chart as well by Picker Red, right? That you see when we talk about red teaming, it is end-to-end coverage. It's not like pen testing, okay, up to here and what. We do not stop at detection. We continue and we test the response and the organization's maneuverability as well in an event of detection. So whenever we look at red teaming, there's always what should be happening as defined by engineering or the tech people or even the organization, and what is actually happening. And normally we stop here, right? As a pen tester or as a vulnerability scanner, right? We realize, hey, your bucket is exposed to the internet, right? That's all. But the question comes when red teamers are involved. What can we achieve afterwards with this open bucket? So this is some like very simple sentence that you can use to describe what a red teamer does in its work. So I'm a bit unconventional. Like people like to use people, process, technology. I like to use people, process, and organization. And I like to point out this big highlighter word called budget priorities. Because coming from a private sector, it's really true that wherever the money goes is wherever the company is making money. And if your budget priority is not at the right places, then it's very likely that that area is being neglected, right? So when we talk about people, we talk about our users in the organization, the functions, and the engineers that's involved, right? And also the processes that are part of the entire business flow, right? Your change management, your IT operations, asset management, etc. At the same time, we also talk about organizational structure and budget priorities within this whole entire families of departments, verticals within a huge org. And red team testing is about looking at scenarios, right? We look at scenarios, we try to emulate threat actors, we try to study what has happened in the past. So these are some high-profile ones like Okta, JumpCloud, even Dropbox Sign that's very recent, right? And some of you who might be experienced CTIs would also know that, hey, these are places CTIs will look at to learn what threat actors are doing, right? But to be frank, as red team engineers, we are looking at this as well to know what other people are doing. Apart from looking in like, small levels, small tier, low level adversary group, Telegram group chats, we also need to study what people has discovered. And just yesterday, right, locally, Jumbo Group and Mustafa got hit by cyber attacks, right? So no one is safe. People keep thinking, who will hit us? Like, yeah, but Mustafa and Jumbo just got hit yesterday. So more to become, this is from Straits Time, so I'm not cooking anything out. This is from Straits Time, okay? This is the real Straits Time, not the fake one. Ask you to go and buy crypto. This is really straitstime.com, okay? So just yesterday, this was reported, and there likely is going to be a post-mortem about how they got in or what, but depend on their disclosure, news will go about. So, what are our goals as red teamers? So I'm still covering what is red teaming. So our goal is to answer anything that our boss say. I think if those who attend Hui's talk yesterday, if your manager say, if your big boss say red teaming is pen testing, then you are pen testing. Whatever. At the end of the day, you have to achieve goals, right? Are we emulating a threat actor? Is it a feasible attack vector, right? Is there any regulatory concerns? what are out of scope. So this is very important because sometimes you might not want to touch things that can get you into trouble and you lose your job, right? And also, what are the crown jewels? But I say so much, right? Just do whatever it takes. Just do whatever it takes, really. As red teamers, do whatever it takes to achieve your goal, but within your boundaries, within your rules. Okay, so depending on your rules of engagement that is set internally, you have to achieve that. So before I talk about cloud engagement, okay, I want to share throughout my entire career of studying what other people have said. We will look at current works that is done by other people when you're starting out in red teaming. So the very first one that I really recommend people to read is this book called Red Team Development and Operations by Joves and James Turtleville. So it's a mouthful, but I like to point out this thing, right? In red teaming, right, effective planning dramatically increases the speed and accuracy of both engagement and culmination of reports. Right? What this means is that you can do whatever you want in an engagement, but having an effective planning will really show great results. Okay. Next, I look at GitLab handbook. Okay, so I also look at GitLab handbook one. So when we do effective red teaming, it helps us to recommend and help us to come up with recommendations to improve detection and prevention as well. At the same time, it's also the way where we can use to emulate real life attacks so that the defenders, the IR and detection engineering can react to something that is near real life. Right? I mean, of course, we are real, but we are fake because we are not stealing money. We're just saying, hey, we got here. Okay. So for those who are very familiar with the capability maturity model in IT operations, okay, so there is this recent model called the red team maturity model, which stipulates the 5 levels as well. You can see I credit here. I never anyhow cook one. So level 1 is things you are doing things that are occasional and one size fits all. Then go out to level 5, which you are being a proactive team, and it's easily customizable within your operating norms. Okay, so this is how maturity of red team is, but they have many different categories, and because today I'm talking about planning, so I picked out a section. So there is even a section of planning and selection that has 5 different levels. So you can go to this website, redteammaturity.com, and find out more. Right. So there are people already talking about, how you should plan, or what you should plan for, what is the mental model you should go towards, right? And even GitLab has another article on how do you run asynchronous teams. So you can run things asynchronously if you're blue team. So that's why it's purple. And then when you do the attack, right, this happens, and then basically telling you that, hey, you don't need everyone to be in the same room. You can run things online, okay, asynchronously, right? It can be in different timelines. But so many authors and works talk about what you should do. But when I read, I think, hey, how do I do the planning? Is it go GitHub, go and find a template, go and do? All right. So before I go to the meat of the entire talk, this is some disclaimer. The following views are solely mine. They do not represent what my organization thinks or say, right? And or whatever organization I'm affiliated to. So, but if you think this is useful and you have an open mind and in fact have feedback about it, I'm open to hearing it as well. Okay, cool. So this is my vision. There's always 3 important phases in entire engagement. There's pre-ops, during ops, and post-ops. Now, due to the time constraint of this session, I only go into detail about pre-ops element, and I also explain why. Because pre-ops elements would heavily affect your during ops and post-op elements as well. So in pre-ops, this is what I would look at it. Usually it's 2 to 6 months before the actual operation. You have these activities that you will go through 100%. Okay, you take photo, So there's scoping, onboarding, pre-ops meeting, sub-task study, logistics and force preparation, ops planning, contingency planning, and dry runs. Okay, so I'll go into each and every one of them. So yeah, let's take a look. So first of all, scoping and engagement, right? It's important to do this first step, because if you don't do this first step, right, it might make or break your entire operation. or rather, do they accept it or not? It's senior management accept it or not? It's at this point of time already. First, you identify boundaries. Usually, I would say no boundaries, but in not all organizations are very liberal. So identify boundaries to make your stakeholder feel safe, right? So things can continue as usual. And you define guardrails, okay? So once you define your boundary and guardrails, you know that you can hit certain areas and still protect your business, because guardrails are supposed to prevent you from hitting things you should not, or even better, you should not hit people who are not within your organization. So maybe in your payload, you should do things like check for certain keywords that belongs to your organization. If not, you don't do, right? So this is one example. And then, of course, you check with compliance and legal to see if you can even do this operation, right? Maybe you're not allowed to do it because even if you're in-house team, you're not allowed to do it because of certain legal compliance issue. Or maybe, for example, your company owns a certain sub-entity and because of some legal problem, right, you cannot do on that sub-entity. That could be an issue as well, right? So always check with legal and compliance. And this is the biggest pain in the ass. Okay, and next is, once you have checked all your administrative stuff, okay, you can start defining your scenarios and persona. These scenarios are scenarios that you're trying to bring out, okay? It's not the user is trying to use an app and log into Facebook. No, not those kind of user story scenario. I'm talking about like, you have an adversary, and what is the goal of the adversary, okay? And what is the persona of this adversary? Okay, this adversary's persona can be highly skilled, medium skilled, highly funded, okay, not so okay funded, or it can be script kiddies. You can have any persona you want, right? But we always assume the worst. So this is more like painting the story, communicating with stakeholders, the seniors and persona. So whenever someone reads a report after the entire engagement, they know the story or the type of scenario you're trying to emulate, and questions are quite streamlined from through there. Okay, so it's about padding your scenario, your engagement to make it more legitimate lah. Okay, it's already legit, but some people when they read the report they don't feel legit. Then this one make it legit. So once you have defined your scenarios and persona, you then can accumulate the threat profile. So this is a threat profile I'm trying to emulate. Okay. Then once you have that done, you need to define your goals. This is very important because any engagement, right, you need to have an end goal. So this end goal is usually what your threat actors would look for. For example, I want to get data. I want to transfer money off your account. Okay, I want to exfiltrate XYZ thing, data from, let's say, air gap environment, right? So if you can achieve that, that is your goal. And this is usually something that when the business see, they will jump out of their seat and scream and scold people who didn't do it. Okay. Then once you have defined your primary goals, which you must achieve or try to achieve, die trying, you can do something called a stretch goal or secondary goal. This is basically saying, hey, I achieved this goal, I can also achieve this goal. So OKR times 2, okay? So that's what you should try to do, right? Stretch yourself to do more, okay? And then get the whole entire proposal approved. So this thing, maximum 1 week settle. Right, so if you need to email, dilly-dally, all this, right, it's up to organizations' time and space. But usually this one will take 1 week to plan. Okay, now you go for the stakeholder onboarding. This one is like very easy to follow. Just make sure your manager is there, your manager's manager is there, your CISO is there, whatever. Whoever you think that needs to know this engagement is happening, let them be there. Okay, system owners inform so that they know this thing is about to happen. Do not panic. It's a fire drill. It's not a no duff. Okay. And then shortlist secondary white cell members. So what do I mean by secondary white cell members? Secondary white cell members are members who are not onboarded yet because they might not be needed then. So the more white cell people you onboard, the more people know about the operation, the more chances of people leaking out and rabbits out of the bag. Right? So to prevent people from doing that, you shortlist them whenever needed. So for example, you hit a certain service and you know that this service is likely required to have this stakeholder to be on board as a white cell to know what's happening, then you onboard. But if you're not going to hit it in the engagement, right, you don't need to onboard. Right? So keep them in the dark if you need to. So this comes as a pre-ops meeting. So when you are done doing your pre two activities, right? You can do your pre-ops meeting. This is where you and your team will meet up and say, okay, this is a scenario. Let's finalize the scenario and persona. This is what we will be acting on. We have to put ourselves in the threat actor's shoe, the adversary shoes. What would they think? Okay, and this is where you also do passive reconnaissance. When you do passive reconnaissance, this will be a typical model that you draw. Okay, my version is like this. Maybe someone here can draw a nicer model, but I always take out Google Slides and just put a few boxes, put a few names, select a few logos. Okay, this is my terrain. Okay, so when you do passive reconnaissance, you are using tools like Maltego, anything that's open source that does some of the scanning, right? Subdomain enumeration, cert scanning, all this. Find out everything about the target you are targeting. Okay, so this, even for internal red team, you have some intimate knowledge, you still can do that to understand what your attacker is going through. So when you write in your report what has been done, right, you can say that, hey, even an external attacker can do this. So as an internal red teamer, it does not matter at all, right? So always do this due diligence to do the passive reconnaissance and all. Unless you say that, hey, the attacker got through a initial access broker, like a different story, yeah. But over here, passive reconnaissance is still very important, right? Go and find out what you can find out from the internet. It's very important. There's 1,001 tools, you can pick your poison. So after you've gathered all intelligence, right, you consolidate them and throw out those that does not make sense. Okay, you throw out and say, okay, this don't make sense, does not occur, it's not part of the entire engagement, throw away. Okay, so once you consolidate, you define the terrain. Okay, this will affect your ops planning in the later part. Okay, you define the terrain. What does it mean by define the terrain? You draw out this model and say this is the terrain, this is how it looks like. Okay, this is what we are likely facing. Likely facing. Okay, I use the term likely facing. And you postulate weaknesses and generate sub-task study. So how do you postulate weaknesses is by, oh my god, there's a typo. How do you postulate weaknesses is by looking at the generated terrain, target terrain, right? You think what is the likely weakness that this organization is facing, this target vertical is facing, and from there you just postulate. So it's just possibilities. They're all possibilities. And once you have done all possibilities, you know for sure that when you go into your ops planning, it will be part of your consideration as well. Okay? And then you generate sub-task studies, which basically means that, okay, from this postulation, I need to have a sub-task study that says, how can I take advantage of this? How should I break in? How should I exploit this issue? X, Y, and Z. Right? It's basically saying, I have this possibility, I need to have some time to study, and I need time to generate the exploit or payload or delivery method, whatever. Right? It's what you need as part of your delivery approach later in the actual ops. So yeah, even sub-task study have its own his own activity. Okay, when you study the sub-task study, you are supposed to understand the sub-task study in consideration of the target environment. And then once you know that, you generate your unit test, which is basically saying, okay, if this sub-task study aims to exploit this service, okay, I need to generate unit tests to prove that this test is working. So you can either have an offline version of it, if let's say you are looking at the open source project, or if it's a black box environment, there's no choice but you have to try and fiddle with it and tickle it and see what are the responses, right? So entire process that you're going through, you have to have OPSEC consideration. So don't go and throw some public tools. You got to go to Python console, open VS Code and code the shit out of it. Okay? So you have to code, you have to understand, you have to really visualize what's happening and think what is the defender doing. Because at this time, you're already in a part of active engagement. You are slowly poking, slowly testing out the system, right? What are the possible weaknesses in the target environment? And at this point of time, right, you are already testing the detection as well. Because you are actively testing in this sub-task study and see what are the behaviors of the system, which is also a bit like penetration testing, right? So what's the difference, right? So you're also pen testing, okay? So then once you have done the exploitability research, then as a team, you will say, is this subtask worth it or not? Is it worth doing it? Is it not? Right? Do you have the time to really go and find a 0 day to exploit them? Yes or no, it depends on the team, right? Most of the time you say no because short of time, right? You don't have all the time in the world. But if you manage to find something that is low hanging, then you can target them straight away. Why not accept the subtask? Okay. And then next is result presentation within a team or to your white cell, whatever, right? So whatever you do in a subtask study, you still have to let your white cell know, and that's part of your engagement process. Okay, to know that hey, we have done this, and this is what will happen, right? So they know and they are prepared they are prepared for this. So of course you trust the white cell to not spill the beans, but if they do, then it's a management issue lah. But in terms of like the entire engagement, you should always ensure that all stakeholders are okay with what you're doing, which also does not mean that they should not stop you. So you get like a good working relationship with the people that you're trying to test for. Okay, so once you have done your subtask study, it's time to provision all your big things, your fun toys. Okay, so you have your infrastructure provisioning, your collector and redirectors provisioning. Right, from there you'll probably do like a multi-cloud environment, right? Maybe you do DigitalOcean here, AWS there, and then Linux on the other side, right? And then you put like 101 Cloudflare accounts everywhere. You just one goes down, one gets blocked, you just change to another one, gets blocked, gets changed to another one, or use what's that? CloudFront. CloudFront also very good. They can't block CloudFront. So yeah, that's one thing, right? And then DNS resource circulation. So just a tip, if you are trying to do an engagement, always try to register your DNS like 2 to 6 months in advance. I myself register them. I cannot tell you when, right? Because people are listening. But I register them X months and years ahead, and I will also ensure that there are certain things that are checked off, right? So just fun fact, when you register a domain and you register it that is similar to a certain track actor group that is using, right, Spam House will block it for you, and that's a pain in the ass. Okay, so I registered something, and then my CTI guy is like, bro, is this you? 2 days, hey, how fast So I registered something and then got blocked by Spam House, so cannot use already. So just all the red teamers here and whoever want to do adversary, just know that if you are following a certain track actor group, know that there's an international CTI group looking at all these domains as well. Okay, if you do things like something dash something dot something, okay, that's likely going to be blocked. But you can try, right? Just pay the $10 on it, pay 10 USD, boom, does it go through? If it go through, okay, good. And then if it doesn't go through and it got blocked by Spam House 2 days later, you're screwed lah. Just try something else, suck thumb. Okay, so once DNS is done, which is very important because DNS makes or breaks part of your project. People see your DNS, people, oh, this is legitimate, let me click on it. And then they realize they're screwed. So you have to make sure that your DNS is registered as part of your profiling. So in the early part of this pre-ops meeting, right, when you define the terrain, you're supposed to profile your organization as well. When you profile your organization, you understand what are the types of technology they're using, what are the possible domains you can use or to trick them into clicking. So for example, login-facebook.com. Okay, so maybe people will like be tricked to log into it, right? So it's very fun when you go to pogban.com or GoDaddy. Yeah, by the way, if you are trying to target an organization, right, just go and do a DNS lookup on their domain and see who is their registrar. If their registrar is something that you can register on your own, you can just go and do the same thing. Then make sure everything is the same. And when you register, it will look exactly like this organization that just registered this weird looking domain, and then the defender will be like, what the hell is going on? Right? Especially when you're trying to do a third party attack. And it's quite crazy. And then your defenders will like, what is this? Then you do your C2 checks in deployment. So this is when you test everything that you have done here and test your payload and test your delivery. What does it mean is that at this point, before you even start anything, you make sure your thing works. Right? You make sure your payload works. You make sure it's calling back. You make sure all your executions are working, and delivery does not trigger any alarms. So usually as an internal team, we have a different cyber range that we can test on to see if it trips any alarm. If you're external team, I'm sorry, but you have to spend more money to buy every single possible EDR and test on it in your own range. Okay, this is one thing you should test. So now comes at ops planning, which is the most wordy part. So first of all, you have the terrain in general. Okay, you can name it differently, but I like to name it terrain in general. So for all the military, ex-Singapore military people, find it very familiar. So terrain in general is basically saying you're looking at the terrain that you're targeting in general, right? What does it mean to the attacker? So for example, over here, the asset IDP provider X, right, suggests that the attacker could leverage on leaked administrative API keys and move laterally. There's just one pause that you have done in terrain in general. And maybe Jenkins, right, suggests that it could be used as a foothold once access to the Jenkins is successful. So that's what it means to the attacker. So when there's attacker, there's also defender. Okay, so you must also think, okay, the terrain also has AWS guard duty. What can a defender use this as its advantage? Okay, then and its effects is the presence of guard duty suggests that any events will be detected, right? So the guard duty has published what it will detect and how it will detect and in what scenarios. Okay, and guard duty you can also pay for your own and use it for free lah, right? And then you will see like what will and be detected in what scenarios. And because of this, you have to be aware of the nature of a payload, and if you reach triggering guard duty, you need to change your payload a bit. Okay. Or maybe EDRX, right? The presence of EDR, you assume the worst, right? You assume, okay, the presence of maybe Trellix. Trellix suggests the risky commands executed in the environment would be flagged, and hence an attacker should perform non-standard execution or maybe follow what the speaker said yesterday, right? 1,001 ways to evade EDR, right? So once that's done, okay, you looked at the terrain in detail. Okay, so from the terrain that you have drawn here, right, you can kind of use this same terrain, and you can draw out this terrain general and terrain general and terrain detail, and really identify the key terrain that the attacker must capture, right, in order to gain a effective foothold in the cloud environment. This could be a CI/CD runner, it could be a server with high permissions, etc. This is totally up to you. For this talk, I'll talk about Jenkins, right? So maybe I would say like Jenkins being a prime target of a majority engine of access, right? Any misconfigured jobs or workspaces can result in RCE. Okay, and you can also say something like it was observed that Jenkins was primarily used in early days, yada da da da, and then therefore, hence due to its history, the role could have had high permissions to it, and is a prime target. You have to capture it, right? So this gives you a plan. Okay, like I said, a plan. But you can sometimes don't follow it when you're executing in the actual environment, right? Because things can change. But here you are planning so that you are moving in tandem with your plan execution. So once you have done your TIG and TID, you will then do this mini thing called wargaming. What does it mean? Is that as an attacker, what do I do? As a defender, what will happen? And then as an attacker, how do I mitigate this? So, okay, storytelling here. Okay, so I know I want to tell a story here. So, there was a RC I found on Jenkins and got detected by EDR. So I'll tell you what I executed here. I did some process hollowing thing, and then it got detected by the EDR. So one fine day I was like, okay, let's try and execute something like process hollowing, something cool. Execute a Go binary in Python that uses process hollowing, and then boom, Christmas light on. But because everything was automated, it got completed there. So always remember, whenever you are doing this attacker-defender postulation, you need to test your mitigation. So that was my mistake there, and I'm sharing my mistake. And then next thing is say maybe you are doing a data exfiltration, and you're trying to, and then the defender will like block your webhooks, right? You'll block your DNS, and okay, maybe I have backup. So then next one, okay, when I'm trying to run previous escalation, okay, what will happen to defender? Defender will say maybe it will disconnect, suspend, or terminate your instance. And then what we will do, maybe you will do something like use a user data to instantaneously run the commands and then kill the instance, for example, right? So these are steps you can do. You can plan in advance, like, okay, when I as adversary execute this action, what my defender might do, and if my defender was successful in their efforts, what should I do as an adversary to mitigate that, so that when I'm executing my actions, I'm making their life more difficult. Right? So that's the mindset of wargaming. Okay, so this is still within a team. So once you have done your wargaming, then you have to think about your delivery. Okay, so I like to name it quick attack and airstrike. So quick attack in my terms basically means fast, right? Stealth, and we prepare pre-scripted payloads. Okay, they will execute and exit. Okay, and that's why it's airstrike. This one is my favorite one, which I've not done yet. It's quite asshole. Basically, I will just trigger many alerts, so much that they don't know which one they're gonna look at. And then in those millions or maybe hundreds or thousands of alerts, one of them will be my intended action. Okay, so this would thin out the defenders' manpower, right? And some people would prefer 8 hours of work instead of 24 hours of work, to be honest. So when this happens, you're really thinning out the entire defenses and going in and buying yourself more time. So not every time in a red team engagement, you should expect no detection. In fact, you should always assume detected. And then what should you do when you get detected? That's why you always go in with a plan. You always go in with a mindset of what should I do if I get detected? What should I do to mitigate these counter actions from the defenders? So once you have done, okay, you can do your ops infra confirmation. Okay, this is what we'll have. Yada da da da. And then once this is done, you do your phases of attack. So the phases of attack will this is something that I picked off from a lesson I gave. So you can draw like, okay, this is how your attack will work, and then this is how the phases will work. So having these phases of attack, this is not the best drawing. Right? This is like super primary school level. Right? If someone has a better way of using like modeling or some stuff, right, you can go ahead. But this is like Google Stats 101. So you can derive like, okay, this is what will happen. So I left out the description. So there's supposed to be a box that describe, okay, what is phase 1, step 1, step 2, step 3. So these phases and all, right, would tell your team, tell your white cell what's going to happen. Okay, so any concerns or whatnot, people can raise it up if they need to. Okay. So once you have confirmed your attack plan, which these lines are very nice, so it's a methodical way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Then you go to your manpower. Okay, your manpower is very like rudimentary administrative stuff. Basically, you're telling people, okay, these are my operators, these are my leads, okay, who are my blue team, who is my white cell, etc., etc., etc. So this is very administrative. It's just part of your plan. Right, so you know who to look for when things happen. And then timings, right? You always need to have timings. So maybe at the first hour when you start your attack, you do immersion, then you do your staging, then you launch your stages of attack, and then you exfiltrate, persistence, and cover, and then you do post-exploitation. Right. So this exactly paints out what will happen as a team. And if you fall behind or time or ahead of time, you know your time and space, you know what you can or cannot do, and you can plan ahead as well on the ball, right? I say on the go, you can plan ahead. So this is like a timetable for you. Right? So you might not need to follow this strictly, but it is a representation of what you can or cannot do in the time or space. Right, and of course, there's always an expected H hour, right, and also expected end of engagement, right. So projected end, let's say it should end within 1 week, but if let's say you are still not detected and you want to push further and see what kind of things you can get out of, then you should have a hard limit to stop, because you cannot be in the system forever. Well, yeah. So that's just ops planning. Okay, ops planning can take 1 to 2 weeks. Just thinking, putting things together, looking at the pause, talking to your peers, talking to system owners, right, doing your open source reconnaissance, all this research takes a lot of time. Okay, once you're done with ops planning, of course you do contingency planning. Okay, there's a something law, right? Assume anything will go wrong, right? Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So you always need to have contingency ops plan. So how is it similar to ops plan? Is basically you take your phases of attack, you mode it, you change it so that in case, okay, if X happen, you can do this. If Y happens, we can do that. So it's taking your ops plan and changing it to like variation A, variation B, variation C. So this is very simple. Okay, then you need to ensure spare resources are allocated, backup plan runbook. So for example, if you are detected, okay, what's your runbook, right? Which contingency plan you're supposed to run? And then scripts to execute contingency, because we want it to be automated, we don't want it to be manual. So just like / boom, the script. Okay, and then indicators to stop engagement. This is very important, because if, let's say, there's a certain scenario or condition that's being hit, and because of that condition we cannot continue, we must stop and declare it as a red team engagement. Okay, so always remember, indicators to stop engagement is super important in stakeholder management, right? You don't want to make people unhappy. And yep, one does not simply test in production, right? So you need to run your exploits in your sandbox, right? Verify payloads in production ready. Okay, test and run your C2 with agents. So this is testing the whole entire thing ready, right? Before you run. Okay, record and detail the expected behaviors. What this means is that when you run, let's say, a payload, and you know that this is the behavior of the payload or the behavior of your script, then you should record it in a way that when people read, when the IR team or detection engineering people read, they know what's happening, right? They know that this is supposed to be expected behavior, right? Sometimes it's very as simple as writing one line, say, this payload does this, done, right? It can be that, right? So this helps them with a reconciliation in the future. Right, second or third person verification, this is like just check, right? And then approval of attack. So basically, the attack plans that you have come out in the ops plan, okay, let's get it agreed internally, right? But it's a more formal way of saying approval. So just let it get agreed internally and say, let's do this. This is the way we're going to do it, right? There's no point doing it if the team majority doesn't agree. So we must agree as a team. So that's end of pre-ops. Like, that's a lot of things, and I still have some time. So now this is when you test in production. Okay, so usually there will be 2 weeks before, usually 2 weeks before the execution, you get like a approval of plan if you need to, right? Certain red team do not need approval, they just execute once they approve it, once they agree internally. But what I will recommend is that get it approved 2 weeks before with your stakeholders if you need to. If you do not need to get it approved because you have a overarching charter that says red team can do whatever the hell they want, by all means, you don't need the first step already. You can just go to the second step, right? Start managing your C2, okay, monitoring it, right? Infrastructure as well. Is it up? So you should set some you should go a bit of DevOps mindset already. Put some monitoring on the infrastructure, right? Are we getting callbacks, right? Pipeline, right? When you create payloads with pipelines, how can you manage it? How should you manage the payloads? How should you publish it? All this, how do you keep it under the wrap so that nobody knows what's happening, right? Strike team coordination is basically saying, okay, this person is doing this, then the other person is doing another task. So how do you coordinate and say, okay, you do this and I do that, right? So this helps this entire team to run effectively, right? Everybody knows what they're doing, right? So you coordinate. And target monitoring, what it means is that you monitor your target and its behaviors after you have done your execution. Did it went down? No, it didn't went down. Good. it didn't break anything in production. But why should you still continue to monitor it? Because sometimes the aftermath comes in like hours or days after. Like, because you did something and then it resulted in a cascading failure days later. This can happen. I personally didn't do it as a red team engineer, but I did it as a software engineer. I dropped a column by accident, and then like, thank God it was in staging, and then only it was discovered hours later. Right, so always do target monitoring to ensure that your target is still healthy. Right, you're not supposed to break things, but of course accidents can happen. Okay, backdoor management is simply as saying, okay, I implanted this backdoor in the cloud. Okay, I can use this method or that method, but I must check if the backdoor is still valid or not. Okay, so how do you do this? Is periodically you try and do some sanity check on the resource and see if it exists or not, right? Or by trying to ping the resource, or by trying to execute certain commands, okay? Or trying to do some AWS, GCP, or Azure CLI that would result in an action or reaction from that resource. Okay? The artifact management, whatever you have gotten from the environment, in the cloud environment, you should manage it properly, you should encrypt it, okay, you should keep it well recorded, and make sure it's all in the ops log, right? This ops log basically tells everyone what has been done. So the moment you have started executing your operation, you need to ensure every single action is logged. What I mean by that is, when you have a terminal open, when you type something that is targeting a resource, you need to log that into your ops log. Okay, you can do it in a Google Sheets, you can do it in your own terminal logs, and then transpose it into some kind of Excel or CSV format, whatever that fits your use case. Right? And then contingency activation is basically, right, if during ops in production, if any contingency needs to be activated, you activate them. Okay, so now you have finished your ops already in the cloud environment. Okay, it's time to do post cleanup. Okay, this is where you say, "Hi guys, it's me." Okay, and then you do ops log reconciliation, right? Report generation. So how do you do this report generation? It's very simple. Take whatever you have done in pre-ops and during ops and just throw it in, right? Because that is why I have a heavy emphasis on pre-ops. Because with this pre-ops, right, everything is planned and modeled out. We can just copy and paste to post-ops and then say, hey, this is what was done. And if there's any changes, what do? Just change the model accordingly and put it back into the report. It's that simple, right? Then you debrief a stakeholder, have a long, nice chat with your IR and detection team, right? Buy them some whiskey if you can. Clean up the environment, okay? Don't forget to do that. You do not want to leave any backdoors for other adversaries to take advantage of, right? Remodel the attack process if you have to. So if let's say the attack process changed due to the shifting nature of production environment, you have to change your attack model so that it reflects what you actually did. And lastly, you reflect and improve as a team. So that is the end. Okay, I also like to take this opportunity to thank people who've mentored me all these years. My collective knowledge in planning with team engagement for the cloud, it's not just what I went through, it's also what people have taught me. So some of you are here and you know who you are. Thanks for mentoring me these years. And yeah, if any questions, want to contact me. This is me, my LinkedIn. There's no other slides already, so thank you.
All right, thanks Cher Boon for the insightful sharing and the interesting stories. Yeah, we still have a bit of time, so we will open up to the floor for any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Hi, just would like to understand, I'm not really in the red teaming, but just curious, in the event of conducting a red teaming exercise, do you have any contingency plan in case a rail attack is also happening at the same time?
Okay, so that's where we stop immediately, right? If we realize that there's more than one person in the environment, something is wrong. That's where we have the activation to stop and let the detection engineer and IR team, hey, someone's in there. So we should stop when we see such things. Yeah. And then let them do their job. We chill. That's why we have the C2 management, payload management, all the thing where during ops you should know the behavior of whatever you generate, your infrastructure, you should be monitoring it so that only you, the expected outcome after, yeah.
All right, any more questions? Okay.
Hi, Melvin here. So can I just check how long is each phase of the red team roughly usually take? Pre-ops and during ops.
So this one, 2 to 6 months, right? So this one actually depends on when you're starting, when you're ending. So it could be like I start on 1st May and maybe end on 30th June, for example. Right? So there's a hard limit, right, and expected stop. So let's say I'm expected to start 30th June, but if I'm still not detected, maybe I can try and stretch a bit and do until August. So those are the 2 timings that we have to follow, but it's a bit debatable. You don't have to follow hardcore for rubber band time. You can maybe stretch a bit depending on the status. And postdocs usually is where we try to do the report as fast as possible, but accurately as well. So all these pre-ops element and during ops elements help us create the report with all the facts, and then we share with all the stakeholders as required. So usually you share with your immediate cybersecurity leaders, okay, and then whoever you need to share with engineering leaders, business stakeholders, etc. So that should take about 1 month.
So all in all, it's around.
It depends. So this is quite fixed, but this can be stretched. You can even do 2 years. Who knows? You are deep in the system, you have like multi-year crap, but in the cloud it's quite flat because people can do defense in depth infrastructure, but when you hit AWS API, it's like the mother of all resources. So yeah. In the cloud you don't usually stay that long. Things get detected really easily after some time.
All right, cool. Any more questions? All right, you really do need the mic.
Hi, so I got 2 questions. This is basically internal penetration testing, right? So my first question is, I'm also interested in detecting the threats. Let's say a hacker who already has a C2 channel inside. So is that part of a red team or is that part of an IR and detection team? That's number 1. And because my second question is, my company is small, I'm looking at penetration testing. So we can't afford to build a red team for ourselves, and we want to engage an outside partner. So from a management perspective, right, what are the things that I should take note of from a stakeholder perspective that I should, take consideration? Thanks.
Okay, so first of all, if there is another attacker in the channel, it is the defender's job to do their job scope. Right? Though we can help as the adversary simulators and emulators, but they got their run books, their playbooks, their systems. They know best, right? They know the system best, so it should be their scope, right? But we can support in an event where we detect there's a third party in the entire, salsa dance we are doing with the systems. But from a question about, we are low on budget or this, right? Then I say you are not mature as a company. You're not mature enough to do a full-fledged red team engagement. But that does not mean that you should not do, right? You should scope your systems based on its requirements and needs, and maybe do a scaled down VAPT assessment, right? And then from there, we will look at something like, what are the technology risks, the organizational risks, okay? And then you yourself can make that judgment call, right? Because the processes are still small scale, so having a red team engagement would be overkill for a small scale business. And I totally agree with you on that.